The rivalry held between Sega and Nintendo during the early days of gaming had a ripple effect for decades to come. See, after Sega's Blue Hedgehog and Nintendo's Red Plumber went head-to-head for dominance over the gaming scene, it was clear if you wanted success as a gaming studio, you needed a mascot. This concept was not lost on PlayStation, and both Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon were the pioneers of the original PlayStation success. Unfortunately, by the time 6th generation gaming came around, both IPs had seen better days. But that didn't matter because of the release of Jak and Daxter and the Precursor Legacy in 2001, and both Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper and the Devious Raccoonist in 2002. These three exclusive PlayStation characters in their respective trilogies would go on to be the kings of not only the PlayStation 2 console, but also 3D platforming as a whole during this era. However, when 7th generation gaming came into play, things changed. Sucker Punch, the developers of Sly Cooper, would hand off the Devious Raccoon to Sanzaru while they moved on to work on Infamous, resulting in everyone not seeing a sequel till 8 years later. And Naughty Dog, the developers of Jak and Daxter, would just outright abandon the IP after a number of failed spin-offs, and would later go on to make critically acclaimed titles like both the Uncharted and The Last of Us video game series, cementing them as a staple in gaming culture. But what happened to Ratchet and Clank? Well, my dear viewer, nothing. Yep, Insomniac, the developers of this dynamic duo, had no interest in giving away or abandoning the series, and the PS3 saw 3 mainline sequels and a number of spin-offs. What's even crazier is most of these titles received glowing reviews from critics and sold well. It was clear Insomniac's train was not slowing down anytime soon, and on April 23, 2013, a teaser was released announcing a full-length theatrical Ratchet and Clank movie. Not only was the movie going to be fully animated in CG, but unlike most video game film adaptations, the voice actors from the games were invited to reprise their roles in the movie. And even better news, it was also announced Insomniac would be making a next-gen PS4 Ratchet and Clank game following the events of the movie meant to coincide with its release. Ratchet and Clank fans were eating good. As more updates rolled out, it was revealed the movie would be very loosely following the first game with a new spin, and as a result, the game was in a way a remake of the original 2002 title, featuring returning planets, gadgets, and weapons. And after the delay, both the movie and game released in April of 2016. And things could have gone better. To be fair, things weren't a complete disaster, since the PS4 game not only sold beautifully, but pleased the majority of its players. However, the movie did horribly both critically and surprisingly financially despite its heavy marketing, ruining any chance for a sequel or the Sly Cooper movie that was scheduled to release afterwards. Man, us Sly fans just can't catch a break, can we? Not even the game was safe from some negativity surrounding it, mostly coming from longtime fans who weren't happy with the story being told, but also had many issues with the way certain elements from the original were adapted, or lack thereof, referencing the planets and weapons that were cut from the original game. Nowadays, the series has made a triumphant comeback with Rift Apart seeing high sales and pleasing fans old and new. But I thought it would be fun to take a look back at 2016, no, not all of 2016, and talk about what I thought worked and didn't with this failed reboot. However, it is important to point out that I've only actually played the first game and know very basic information outside of it involving the rest of the series. And plus, it's been a hot minute since I've played said game, so take this from the perspective of someone who's familiar with the series, but isn't super well versed in the knowledge surrounding this wacky universe outside of the 2016 game. With that said, let's begin. First things first, we can't ignore the sheer amount of polish and eye candy when it comes to the visuals. We really are in the future, aren't we? This game looks like a Pixar movie at all times. Not only are the animations slick and fluid 24/7, but everything including the enemies and environments just look and feel alive. Just look at the amount of shit happening on the screen. Keep this in mind when I say I rarely ran into any frame rate drops throughout my intergalactic journey. I'm always wowed by how good this game looks every time I go back and visit it. I just briefly mentioned the environments, but let me talk about that more. Each of these planets are distinct in look and tone. There's planet Veldin, a dry, empty desert, Novalis, a peaceful town overrun with Blarg, Kerwan, a futuristic, lively big city, Iridia, a dark and stormy construction site, Reglar, a shady city suffering from a severe infestation problem, Nebula GG4, a empty, isolated space station, technically not a planet, but it still counts, Gasper, a dry and fiery landscape, Batilia, a snowy war zone, Quartu, a barren landscape filled with metallic facilities and pollution, Pokataru, a beautiful watery resort, Planet Kalebu, the high-tech home base of Gadgetron, and the Planetizer, a space facility where most of Drek's forces are stationed. While places like Nebula GG4, Gasper, and the Planetizer were admittedly boring, Places like Koron, Riglor, and Pocataru were absolute treats to visit, and each of these planets have unique environments and locations to make each of them memorable. Unfortunately, things aren't that interesting when it comes to the soundtrack. The original game had distinct tracks for each planet you visited, but here, the same generic hero music plays 24/7. You could honestly tell me every single track in the game was the same track and I would believe you. It all sounds so generic and just blends together. Now as for the cutscenes, well, they're harmless. See, there's two types of cutscenes. Pre-rendered cutscenes from the movie and real-time in-game cutscenes. Now I don't mind at all that they use movie footage for most of the cutscenes. The stories are one and the same, so not only does it completely fit, but it saves on cost and development. As for real-time cutscenes, they're mostly used for conversations held between two characters, and they're not good. They're harmless overall, but the characters look super stiff during these, and most of the time you can tell Ratchet is not at all making eye contact with the person he's talking to. Hell, sometimes it's clear he's not even looking at them. They try to hide this by switching between shots with the two talking, but it still looks odd. I know this is a giant-ass nitpick, but I couldn't help but comment on it. The few times they use real-time cutscenes for other things, they look pretty damn good. So yeah, this game looks beautiful, in the story. But now I think it's time I talk about how this game plays. As far as movement is concerned, Ratchet is super smooth to control. His main moveset consists of a double jump, a melee attack using an Omni Wrench, an attack that allows you to dodge said Omni Wrench, and a grapple hook used for traversing gaps in between platforms. You'll be controlling Ratchet for most of the game, like your usual Ratchet and Clank game, but you're also able to control Clank in multiple segments throughout your journey. As Clank, you're either getting chased by Victor, or you're solving a fun puzzle minigame using specific boss to make your way through areas like in the original. But how on earth could I not mention the main attraction? The weapons. As you collect bolts throughout the game, you can use them to purchase new weapons from the Gadgetron vendors stationed across the galaxy. And boy are there a number of weapons. First is the Fusion Bomb. Nothing special, just an instant impact grenade. Then there's the Combustor, a simple range single fire weapon. While it wasn't the best thing in the world, I found myself using it pretty frequently, especially when dealing with airborne enemies. After that is the Pyro Sitter, a flamethrower that's pretty useful for close combat fights and dealing damage to multiple threats at once. Then there's the Proton Drum, a drum that will emit a pulse damaging nearby threats. After that is Mr. Zircon, an ally you can deploy in the field to help you out and lend you extra supporting fire. Then there's one of my personal favorites, the Groovatron, a weapon that will force your enemies to break out and dance, giving you valuable time to deal in some free damage. What I love most about this weapon is it works on anything, main bosses included. Then there's another one of my favorites, the Pixelizer, basically a shotgun that will turn your enemies into 8-bit versions of themselves. The Predator Launcher, not much to say, it's just a rocket launcher. The Plasma Striker, basically a sniper rifle that will reveal the critical point of whoever you're fighting. The Warmonger, a mini rocket launcher. The Glove of Doom, a weapon that deploys tiny robots to attack your enemies. Buzzblades, a weapon that fires home-seeking blades. The Sheepinator, a beam that turns anything into a sheep. And lastly, the Rhino. I've never used the Rhino before, but it's safe to say it's OP due to it being a grind to get. Side note, there's also the Bouncer, a pre-order exclusive weapon I was fortunate to have access to. This is easily my favorite weapon in the game, and I genuinely feel bad for fans of the title who don't have it. Yeah, it's clear this game has a badass selection of weapons to choose, and I'm in love with pretty much all of them. But that's not everything involving the weapons. See, there's also a weapon leveling system. The more XP your weapon gets, the more it comes close to leveling up. There's 5 levels for each, and once you level them up all the way, they'll upgrade to a more improved version of said weapon under a new name. You can also upgrade each of your tools of destruction, see what I did there, in a Gadgetron vendor using your Retanium, a second currency you can obtain by either killing enemies or finding in specific locations. You see, as you progress, you can obtain card packs that you can open in the options menu. Getting 3 cards of the same set will unlock an upgrade for either your weapons or another feature. You can actually trade in duplicate cards to complete a set of your choosing, which is just so fucking cool. However, you're not going to unlock every weapon and holo card in one run, and that is what Challenge Mode is for. Challenge Mode is the new game plus of this title, allowing you to replay the game of all of your weapons and upgrades you unlocked. Not only does the Challenge Mode make enemies tougher, but it also allows you to purchase godly variants of your regular weapons, if you complete the holo card set for said variant. I've said it many times in my past reviews, and I'll say it again. I love replayability, and Ratchet and Clank PS4 has that in spades. But enough about the weapons and upgrades, what are you going to be using them for? Well, each planet has their own type of wildlife you'll be facing, but the most common enemies are Blog forces. They're standard Blog troops, Blog with jetpacks, and warbots. The threats you'll be facing against vary, and they're all serviceable in their own right. Going over to bosses, this game has a good number of them. First is the Bloggy and Snaggle Beast, a boss also seen in the original. It's a pretty simple and fun boss. Then there's Mrs. Zircon, who is admittedly a funny boss in concept, but for some reason is so goddamn tough to beat. Then there's Captain Quark towards the end of the game, who has a pretty damn good boss fight. One really cool thing about it is Quark uses her own arsenal against you, even going as far to use the Gurutron, which actually forces you to dance uncontrollably.
What's your hurry? I thought you wanted to be a hero.
This fight is a great way to end the game, since not only is it a fun boss, but it's a good challenge that puts all the upgrades you synced into your weapons to work. To make a pretty long story short, this game has amazing gameplay and is insanely fun to play each and every time I go back to revisit it. There's loads of replayability, depth to your weapons, and the main story alone will last about 10 hours. Insomniac did a really good job. But what about the story? Well, there's a lot to talk about. See, this game adapts the story of the movie versus adapting the story of the first game. So yeah, there's understandably a lot to cover. So let's not waste any more time. This script is already over 2,000 words long. Now what's really cool about the game is instead of starting the story where the movie starts, it instead shows us a prisoner being introduced to his new cellmate, Captain Quark. It's here where the game's comedy peaks.
I'm a huge fan. I even pre-ordered the new Ratchet and Clank holo game.
The what?
You know, the game based on that incident with you and that Lombax.
Oh, you must mean the holo film. Yeah, it's pretty good, if you like all CG.
No, I mean the game. It's based on the holo film. Look, here's my confirmation email. I'm having it mag shipped to prison.
They're making a game based on a holo film based on my life? But they haven't even consulted me. Oh, this is my fault. I've been away from my adoring public in this forsaken place too long. And now, no one will ever hear my side.
I'd like to hear your side, Captain.
You would? Well, then sit down, wary criminal, and I'll tell you a story. It all started with a hapless Lombax named Ratchet.
Yep, Captain Quark is the narrator of the story in this game, and it's as great as you'd probably imagine. He even sometimes narrates during gameplay. It's great. Now switching over to the actual story, it follows Ratchet, a Lombax who's the last of his kind, who's a youngster who aspires to be a Galactic Ranger. Basically this universe's Justice League. That sentence alone is enough for any fan of the original game to realize this is an entirely different Ratchet. Instead of being a selfish, cynical loner, he's an upbeat, cheerful wannabe hero. Now I actually don't mind this concept. It's a reboot, so obviously the writers want to take the story in a new direction instead of telling the exact same story the original game did. However, one major problem is this Ratchet is just not interesting. He has no depth, no hidden layers, he's as one-dimensional as they come. And this wouldn't be as big of a problem if this was original character. I mean, big whoop. But they already had a well-written version of Ratchet that they didn't use. You know, the original one. Anyways, back to the story, Ratchet convinces his friend Grimm to go to the tryouts being held by the Galactic Rangers to find the fifth member. Now apparently the Galactic Rangers were a robot army that served the president in the old games, but they changed it to a group of actual characters, with Quark being the leader. And I like that. What I don't like is everyone but Quark are walking stereotypes. There's the tough one, the other tough one, and the nerdy one. There's nothing wrong with stereotypes as long as you make them fun and memorable, but these characters are neither of which. They're pretty boring.
You're reckless, you're a loose cannon, and you're dangerous. That's my shtick.
Tryouts don't go too well with Ratchet being denied almost immediately. Meanwhile
on planet Quartu,
so off, we get introduced to Drek, who was the antagonist of the first game. And what the fuck did they do to you? In the original, Drek was an all-powerful businessman whose presence demanded respect. He was a ruthless, super serious villain who did not mess around. Here, he's a joke. He's constantly played out for comedic effect and is shown to be incompetent on his own without the guidance of Dr. Nefarious. Oh, and Dr. Nefarious is in this. Now at first, this seems like a pretty awesome version of Nefarious. Not only is he not a cyborg yet, but he's a more stern and serious version of the character while still having hints of what's to come. And having him be an ex-Galactic Ranger who grew frustrated with Quark rising to fame and power because of his inventions was really cool. But there's an issue with him I'll get to later. Nefarious reveals the Warbot army he's creating for Drek, but out of the machine pops a defect. It's never explained why a defect was created in the game, but in the movie it was the result of a power surge. The defect barely escapes from Victor, the loyal robot henchman of Drek, and he crash lands on Veldin. Ratchet saves him before his ship blows up, and after a formal introduction, he names the robot Clank. And just like that, the iconic duo is reborn. Now Clank, in this new version, just doesn't work. In the original, Clank's straightforward and mature personality was a direct contrast from Ratchet's irrational and immature mindset. Here, however, they no longer have that dynamic, so Clank is just kinda boring. He also used to have a certain level of sass and wit, but that's no longer the case here. Just like the original, Clank warns Ratchet of Drek's evil plan, and Ratchet agrees to give him a ride, except this time, he's doing it for a chance to meet the Rangers again, not for money. Now I think we're far enough in the story where I can discuss the humor. This game is trying way too hard to be funny, resulting in it achieving the opposite. I know this is for little children and a critical buzzkill like me isn't exactly the target audience, but I'm sorry, this game is just not funny. You can't really be critical on something that's so subjective, but the original was so cleverly written and had many jokes that got me to laugh out loud. Not only that, but it was self-aware. This game has every cliche joke you can pull from the book, and it's not self-aware in the slightest. Anyways, the two set off, and they do what the original did where Ratchet's ship is shot down and they crash in Ovalis. Here you meet up with the Plunger, and he shows you an info bot that reveals Drek's plan to take parts of other plans to build an all-new one after their old one was destroyed because of pollution. I kinda like the movie's way of doing this better, where they slowly give you more and more info of Drek's plan until it's revealed what his true intentions are, despite fans of the series already knowing what's up. They get their ship repaired, and I will admit this fourth wall break is pretty funny.
No problem. See you in the next reboot.
And they shoot off the Kurwan that's being invaded by the Blarg. Ratchet uses Magnet's device in his ship to draw the warbots away from the city and blow up enemy ships, cementing them as heroes of the public. Under pressure, Quark reluctantly accepts the two into the Galactic Rangers. Now in the game, this makes sense since Ratchet is a gunslinging badass as far as gameplay is concerned. But in the movie, this was all dumb luck, and Ratchet is shown to not know how to handle weapons in the slightest. Actually, as I'm writing this, I just realized, what does he even do that's useful to the team in this movie apart from the climax? He's completely useless. Now, I want you to listen to me. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets after this. Iridia, Viglar, Nebula, DG4, Gasper, and Bateria. And I'm not going to talk about the story content present in either of these planets. You want to know why? Because it's all filler. It's all 5 hours of filler. Listen, I know why this is. The movie is 2 hours and the game is 10. Every movie licensed game has filler, but the good ones take that downtime and do something meaningful with it, like introduce a new villain, give more context to the story it's adapting, have more characters, something. You wanna know what happens? You save Skid Mid-Marks and his agent, compete in a hoverboard race, get sent on a suicide mission by Quark that doesn't get brought up again, get this widow brains for a jetpack, and stop the Blarg from destroying defensive cannons. None of that is connected and barely relates to the main story whatsoever. It's all just there to pad out runtime. Whatever. So anyways, the team attacks one of Drek's assembly lines, which happens to be the place of Clank's birth, and we get this amazing line of dialogue.
Oh my. This assembly line is the place of my creation. I am experiencing many conflicting feelings.
The group learns Drek is planning on destroying the valves of his Death Star, the Planetizer, which is a newly built space station. The Rangers pay a visit with Quark speeding ahead to try and talk to Drek. Victor pursues Clank, and this intimidating general is destroyed by water, which I'll admit is a little funny. Once in the Planetizer, Ratchet attempts to shut it off, but it stops by Drek and he's being carried away. As he's being carried away, it's revealed Quark is working with the Blarg. Okay. In the movie, this was done much better. You see Quark get approached by Drek, and you see him get manipulated by Drek into turning on his Rangers because he's desperate to get in the spotlight again after Ratchet stole it. Not only that, but Quark and Ratchet have a good relationship in the movie, making this portrayal actually impactful. But in the 5 hours of filler this game has, they couldn't find time to fit that in, so this comes completely out of left field. Also, in the game, Ratchet is a dumbass for not seeing this coming. I know it's played off as a joke how bad Quark is hiding how much he wants Ratchet dead in the game, but it instead just makes Ratchet look dense and clueless. Earlier in the game, this very man neglected to defend the cannons protecting the galaxy from invasion for a spa treatment. Later, Ratchet has this half-assed moment where he gives up on being a ranger, but then immediately joins back, and there's definitely not 2 forgettable missions I'm choosing not to talk about because they have no relevance to the plot.
When you use it, post your thoughts on the social medias. The kids love their social medias. Hashtag Gadgetron.
Ugh. And they take a second go at the Planetizer. It's here where Nefarious turns Drek into a sheep. Yep, the main big bad of the game is utterly humiliated and disposed of by Dr. Nefarious, making him the Trist final villain. Look, I like Dr. Nefarious. He's had the most appearances out of any Ratchet and Clank villain for a reason. But this was at a time where fans were starting to get a little tired of seeing him everywhere. Not only that, but these very same fans hadn't seen Drek in 14 years. So ditching him to make Nefarious the main villain of yet another Ratchet and Clank game understandably pissed a lot of fans off. Not only that, but a newcomer likely won't know how big Nefarious is as a villain, so this will come completely out of nowhere. Ratchet makes it to the main controls of the Planetizer when he's confronted by Captain Quark, and the two get in a fight. Now in the movie, this fight makes much more sense since Quark is way more experienced and is about to kill Ratchet when he realizes how far he's fallen and stops his attack and apologizes. In the game, however, Ratchet just shoots him a bunch until it abruptly cuts to Quark apologizing. "You're not sorry, you're sorry you got your ass beat." Then Nefarious shows up and it's time for the climax. Now, I love the game's climax much more than the film's. In the movie, Ratchet just runs up and smacks Nefarious and electricity from his wrecked Rhino presumably vaporizes him. In the game, however, this man pulls out a mech.
Now, where were we? Ah, yes. Annihilating you!
And you have a one-on-one battle with him, next to a fucking dwarf star, ending with the star vaporizing Nefarious once its destroyed mech just into it. Hey, Insomniac? I couldn't help but notice your climax ends with your furry hero on a jetpack shooting a giant mechanical threat who is then put out of commission and burns. Interesting. In all seriousness, I like this final battle much more. While the movie wouldn't be able to fit a fucking mech into its climax, Nefarious' defeat is still anticlimactic. The three escape to the Planetizer and the game ends with Quark concluding his story. Then Ratchet and Clank comes to visit him in prison.
Hey, Ratchet, Clank, how are you guys?
We are doing well. We just came here to visit the Rangers.
Yeah, Alaris invited us over to try out some new weapons and, you know, just boring old stuff. How are you?
Great, good, fine, yeah.
Prisoner escaping. Prisoner escaping. Prisoner escaping.
What did I tell you? No prison can hold Ship Helix!
Ready, pal?
Always.
Hey, you coming?
Absolutely.
I actually prefer this ending way more than the one in the movie where Clank shows up at Ratchet's garage revealing the two are now inseparable, which doesn't hold the same weight as the original game's ending due to the two not having any major differences or arguments throughout the story. Although I do wish the post-credits scene revealing Nefarious' classic cybernetic form made it to the game in some way since it's a pretty good stinger. And that concludes the story of Ratchet and Clank 2016. Sheesh. Yeah, it's a mess. The things that make the original story work are either missing or replaced by something with little to no substance, a lot of context the movie gives is left out, there's 5 planets in a row filled with nothing but pointless fucking filler, and almost all the characters are completely uninteresting. So, does this story have one saving grace? Well, it does. Quark. In the movie. Seriously, the movie has a really good Quark, and you see him go from an oblivious, self-absorbed hero to jealous and desperate to stay in the spotlight, to him reluctantly taking Drek's shady deal to erase Ratchet out of the picture and have things go back to normal, to him realizing he's the villain of this story. It's a really solid arc. Oh, you thought I was talking about the game? No, it's shit all around. If you're wondering what I think of the movie as a whole, it's alright. A lot of the issues I pointed out, like the uninteresting characters and dumb twists, are still present, but at the very least it's paced way better, you get full context to what's going on, more of the jokes hit, and it's beautifully animated. As far as video game film adaptations go, it's not bad. In conclusion, Ratchet and Clank PS4 is a very interesting time in the Lombax's history. While the story is absolutely abysmal, both the presentation and gameplay are phenomenal. However, there are a significant amount of plans from the original that were outright cut, which is understandable since the game had a deadline it was supposed to meet, but is it better than the original game? Well, in terms of controls, gunplay, and visuals, the reboot excels. However, I honestly think the original might be a better choice. Not only do you get 10 times better writing, but you get way more planets to explore and a lot of the same weapons. Listen, I'm not saying Ratchet and Clank for the PS4 is bad. Far from it. But not only does it ultimately fail in surpassing the original, but if you really care about the story side of things, you will be severely disappointed. Either way, the movie's failure at the box office would prevent a sequel from being made, which also prevented the possibility of a second movie licensed game, which ultimately made both the 2016 game and film a failed reboot. But what about you guys? Have you guys played the game before? If so, what do you think of it? Were you pleased or left disappointed? Let me know in the comments. I don't normally do this, but this video I have to recommend covering this topic. The gaming Brit shows how Ratchet and Clank lost its edge. I haven't seen it in years, but I remember it being a very good and thorough comparison of the original game and the 2016 reboot. Definitely go watch it if you want to see an actual expert of the series talk about this game. Link in the description. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, then please like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next time.